So this is the Northern Virginia Hospital LHRC rescheduled meeting to 9/29, 6:30 p.m. at 106 Tinner Hill Road. This is our alternate location. And we will let the we'll go around and say who we are for the record, and then we'll let the chair start the meeting. Ann Pasco, Regional Advocate, Office of Human Rights.
Donalda Jones, member. Cheryl Blacker, member.
One.
There you go.
Jen Anglin, Human Rights Advocate.
Abbas, staff at Evergreen Home.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were,
Very good. Thank you. All right. And very good. Leave it time.
6:30.
Woo, no, on the dot. Okay. So just a roll call of attendance. Juanita James is here. Sue Hainish is here. Cheryl Racker's here. And Donalda Jones is here. And so you can do the agenda. Any questions or changes to the agenda? Yeah. So I need a motion, a second, and then I'll roll call approval.
I need to approve the agenda as submitted. Second.
Aye. Very good. You're in agreement. Donalda, you in agreement?
Yes.
Cheryl, you're in agreement?
Yes.
Sue, you're in agreement?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so the minutes from the last meeting? You guys, those were emailed to you, so if you remember that.
I second our motion.
All right, Juanita, you in agreement? Sue, you in agreement? Cheryl, you're in agreement? Donalda, you in agreement? Very good. Next item. So I did not put this on the agenda, so forgive me. I would like to formally welcome Juanita James to the Northern Virginia Hospital LHRC. As you guys know, Juanita served on the Prince William County one for 6 years, right? Very active member and did a great job. And we're very happy that you are willing to continue your work with LHRC and join this committee. So welcome to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Is there anyone available or interested in making public comment?
Nobody online?
Nobody online. All right. So we'll jump to the next business. So because this is not going to be in closed session, it's an open session. You guys already reviewed them. And you didn't need to look at them, Juanita. I did not email them to Carrie or Perpetua. That's normally who I would send stuff to if you need it beforehand. So we have two individuals. And so after having reviewed that, I'm going to let you know what some of the recommendations are. If you guys are in agreement with that, then we'll take a vote on each of the individual ones, a motion, a second, and then an approval for each one. So individual number one, if you did read, the individual does disagree with this restriction. So if you have any questions about the restriction itself, you can talk about that. But in general, you can approve it. He can still disagree. And the disagreement process is that there's he requests an investigation. He files a complaint with the Office of Human Rights where he feels that this restriction violates his human rights. There will be an investigation by the facility. And then there's a letter that determines whether it was substantiated or not substantiated. He has the right to appeal that. If he disagrees, then he can have a hearing saying, I disagree, I think my rights have been violated. So that's the fair review process. So that him disagreeing is separate from if you guys are in agreement that it's a legitimate restriction. He just doesn't like it. He doesn't think he needs it. He doesn't feel that he needs to have that restriction. No. Right. And of course, this is not a new restriction. It had been implemented before, and he just is not.
And he thinks right now it's just not necessary anymore.
Right. With no.
Yes, as far as I know, because I think we reviewed him before, right?
Yeah, we've reviewed him before.
Yep.
So the recommendation is to continue with the restriction and to have him come back at the December meeting. And that will give a chance for him coming back to the December meeting for the complaint process to go through, for them to investigate, for them to send him the letter, for him to initiate a complaint. So it takes us out of it, lets the other complaint process.
If he does, and we wouldn't necessarily get confirmation, you guys as a committee, whether he submitted a complaint or not, unless it goes to a hearing.
Unless it goes to a hearing. Yeah. He's already submitted the complaint.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't see those because it's a facility advocate, but yes, they were helping him file the complaint.
Okay.
And then we'll be able to know. So if he wants to, that'll be interesting. If he wants to do a hearing, who's doing that, Ivana? We'll figure that out. You'll know because it'll probably come to this LHRC as a hearing.
Yeah, he had to get approval from his team prior to.
So just be mindful that this is still open session, not to discuss too much in detail. So the recommendations is just for you to be aware that he did file a complaint and that he would return in December at the December meeting. So if you're in agreement with that, I just need a motion, a second, and then we'll roll call it. Restriction continue with a re-review coming back in December. Okay, Donalda, second. Juanita. Juanita, are you in agreement with continuing the restriction and reviewing in December? Cheryl, you're in agreement? Sue, are you in agreement? Donalda, are you in agreement? Very good. All right. Individual number 2. This is a new plan. There are a fair amount of things listed on there. One of the recommendations is that the provider become compliant with 12 Act 35, 115, 105B. And some of that recommendation also come from the IRC. The IRC is asking for the plan to come back in the next month. So that's why the recommendation for this plan to return to your October meeting as well. So that'd be 3 weeks from now to review what the IRC, because the IRC had recommendations and they don't always have those. And so that would give us a month, give them a time to respond. The IRC is an independent review committee that reviews the clinical efficacy of a plan. That's the clinical part. We're the administrative part, that's the clinical part. So the recommendations are, so the recommendations are that they become compliant with 105B of the Human Rights Regulations and return to the October meeting. It has to do with less restrictive and following the review process.
Is that what their feedback was in terms of what they needed to fix?
Yes. Yeah. You should. So 105B, providers may utilize individual restrictions such as restraint, timeout, and behavior treatment plan to address challenging behaviors that present immediate danger to self and others, but only after a licensed professional has conducted a detailed and systemic assessment of the behavior and the situations in which the behavior occurs. Provider shall document individual service record that the lack of success or probable success of lesser restrictive procedures attempted or considered and the risks associated with not treating the behavior greater than any risk associated with the use of the proposed restrictions. The IRC feels that lesser restrictive alternatives were not identified. So you don't want to take away something that's needed, but you want to give them time to figure it out. So don't go into specifics, I'm sorry. It's going to be the restraint. Yeah. So the proposed restraints needed to demonstrate compliance with the regulation where lesser restrictive alternatives were demonstrated to have been used, effective, right? You can't just put a restraint, utilize a restraint and not demonstrate you've tried other things, right? What other things you tried, what can you try? And so that was their recommendation. Right, and they're going to review that because they asked it to come back to them again. So that's why the suggestion is to have it come back to us within that similar time frame.
So just a procedural question about that to clarify, because this is the first time I've ran into this. So how would the plan end up getting to us if the IRC said this is not in compliance?
Then we would know, the provider would tell us, because the provider has to let us know what the recommendations are from the IRC or if there's an issue with the IRC. So I typically ask for verification that they went to the IRC, what it said, and there's a form.
Even if the IRC had
The IRC said no, IRC has to approve it before it gets to us. The IRC did approve this.
Oh, gotcha. They
IRC
approved it, but with the caveat of this recommendation.
Right, conditionally saying, we're not going to take away something that's needed, but we're going to say you need to look at this. Does
Okay, gotcha.
that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or October, sorry, October. Yes, I agreed with you and I know it's October. So they'd come back with it by the next meeting. So that means they would go to the IRC and then they'd come to us. So they would have feedback from the IRC. Yeah, but they told them what next meeting to come back to. I assumed that they were having one. That's what the recommendation was on their stuff, was to come back in October. You can push us to, see, I don't think we have a December meeting or November meeting.
Or did we have one early in the month? Last year we did, didn't we? Oh, we skipped November, do early December. Okay. Right,
Yeah,
right.
so it's October 27th and then December 8th. So if you want to wait and push it to December 8th, so it gives them time to make changes, you can do that, but then it won't have, I mean, their current plan would be approved. But you, like I said, your choices are October or December.
They have to provide this information back to the IRC.
Mm-hmm.
And assuming the IRC.
Then they have to go back to the IRC until it is good enough.
So they have to pass the IRC.
Yes. Have to have IRC approval before the LHRC reviews it. The IRC did approve it, what was presented, but they said, we're approving it temporarily. You need to fix these problems and come back. Okay. Okay. Mhm, mhm. Okay. So so there's a motion and a recommendation that they become compliant with 12 Act 35, 115, 105B, and that they return to the October meeting, providing that they have IRC. Well, no, I mean, we're gonna put in the agenda if they don't have IRC approval, then that's a different story, but we just need that this is our recommendation. So motion, second, and then a roll call. Very good. Can I have a second? Juanita, you in agreement?
Yes.
Sue, are you in agreement? Cheryl, you in agreement? Donaldo, you in agreement? Very good. All right. So we have research to be reviewed, and here's, if you want, a piece of paper on the research regulation. And there's two that we're reviewing, and these had been on previous agendas. Oh, that's pretty. That was one of mine.
Yeah.
Was it? Oh, give it the gold one. Thank you. So there's two research. One is from Clementine Twin Lakes. They were supposed to come back in June. Oh my gosh, I can't say my months. June. Anyway, through miscommunication, this is a periodic review for Clementine Twin Lakes. The Clementine Fairfax, same organization, different location, is and different license. That's why it's two different things. It's two different licenses. So they are requesting research as well. It's identical to the Clementine Twin Lakes research. So the Twin Lakes is a review, the Fairfax is new, but everything is essentially identical. So if anyone needs to see the forms, I have the two forms. So Clementine is a review. Twin Lakes is a review and Fairfax is an approval. So what we look for, if you read the research regulations, is we're looking for that they have the International Review Board, the IRB approval, which they do. They sent us the letter. We looked at they have consents, and they developed consents, and that they have given those consents to the individual participants, which Twin Lakes has done, Fairfax will do once that they can't move forward. Fairfax cannot move forward with research until it's approved by the LHRC. So Twin Lakes is just a periodic review, and Fairfax is an approval. So so seeking to approve the continued research by Clementine Twin Lakes, oh my gosh, Twin Lakes, and approval of Clementine Fairfax with that recommendation that both of them return for a periodic review in June, since that was sort of the original review date in June. And June doesn't feel as busy as October and September. Yes, they've been doing this for a while. So it's when they started, they came to this committee. This is one of the first research you guys had, was at this committee. Yeah. So it's essentially what they're doing is, doing a baseline when somebody comes in and doing periodic, surveys to see how effective their treatment is. But it is research because they're using it to guide their practices. So it is research. They're taking surveys, they're collecting data, they did submit it to the IRB. So there is other organizations. So in terms of the clinical efficacy or the rationale for doing this, we don't have to evaluate this. We look at the consent piece and whether they have all the approvals that they need to have. That's what we look at.
I motion.
So we're gonna do them separate. One is for Twin Lakes and return in. Very good. Can I have a second on that? Juanita, thank you. Juanita, you're in agreement? Sue, you're in agreement? Cheryl, you're in agreement? Donaldo, you're in agreement? Okay. And then Fairfax. Thank you. Can I have a second? Juanita? You're in agreement, Juanita?
Yes.
Sue, you're in agreement? Cheryl, you're in agreement? Donaldo, you're in agreement? All in agreement. Very good. Thank you. I'll take my research paper back. You can keep that. That's for the one that has the thing on it. You can take that. For sure, you might need it. So the last business is variance. And so this is a copy of the regulations on variance, and we'll tell you what we need to do today.
This is your first one.
I know, this is the first one in the region, to be honest. So this is a bit of a learning experience for all of us. So the provider submitted a variance application. If you want a copy of it, I have the variance application, which is the LHRC review form. I have a copy of their variance that was sent to you guys. So Jen, do you want to talk briefly just about the purpose of the variance and why it came to us?
Sure. So this provider provides services to a very vulnerable population. Most of them, well, actually all of them that come in have some kind of trauma history in their background. And so this is in place for immediate safety of all those individuals that come in. I don't want to how specific or detailed I should get, but
They do approved contact list where the individuals within the program are only allowed to receive or contact people on this list. And the list is developed by case managers. The clinical team develops this list. The individual has some input, but not 100%. So this list can have people that maybe they would say, no, I want my dealer to be on that list. No, we're not gonna have your dealer on the list. So
calls and visitors.
Yeah.
And it's very specific to the person upon admission, because each of them, I mean, they're not all the same. They're not a blanket, case as they come in. So very specific in terms of reasons why, and documented on your LHRC forms individually. They're supposed to be sent to me. So I get each one of them upon admission. Right now, what they're doing, because they don't have the variance in place, is fill out your LHRC forms that shows the restriction for each person that's admitted. They send the form to me directly. I review it, ensure that, all of the criteria that they've indicated on their variance is on that form in terms of justification as to why that restriction is needed. So right now they're doing it on an individual basis. The variance is going to replace all of that, and then they won't have to fill out a form every single time and get that restriction reviewed and approved by you guys. So
it's an ongoing process that they do. It's not likely that this process is going to end. So variance is saying, I'm going to follow all the regulations except this one. And in this one, I don't want to do that because of reasons X, Y, Z, and I'm going to do this instead. So they have to offer the alternative. And then they have to indicate what would be the conditions under which we would stop doing this variance. And then the variance is reviewed by you guys annually. Now, if you look at your notes on variances, it does talk about that you guys approve it. So it's had to go through their governing body. Their governing body had to say, yes, we want to pursue this variance. Then it comes to you where they detail everything. You approve that. Then you send a letter to the director of the Office of Human Rights and say, we accept this variance or we don't. And here's what we think is important for you to know. And that goes forward to them. And then it goes to a public body hearing, goes to the SHRC. There's a whole bunch of other steps before it comes back to the provider that the variance is accepted. And then there's periodic reviews of the variance. So you can make recommendations to either approve it or not approve it. Whoops. You can make other recommendations in terms of what you'd like to see. So some suggestions are that perhaps you approve it. You can recommend that the provider supply routine updates to the LHRC regarding the justification for the ongoing need for the variance, and have the circumstances where the variance is no longer required been met. Have there been any impact on the individual's rights? So you can say, yes.
Can you clarify what the alternative behavior is gonna be? Or alternative?
Oh, I have to see the thing that I gave you. It should have been detailed in there what they're gonna do. Do you remember
So
specifically?
instead of having the freedom, yes, that's the alternative to having the freedom to call whoever you want. The alternative is you can still call whenever, but you're only allowed to call these people. So it's not like the variance is being, the right is being taken away completely. We're substituting it with this revision, and it's a restriction, but this is what we're giving you the freedom to do. You can still call whenever, but you can only call these people.
So they're allowed to impose the restriction without having to come and have it reviewed for everybody every time. They can just impose the restriction as a part of their process, which they're already doing, but then they have to come to you every time for every person. This variant says, I'm not going to come to you every time for every person. This is going to be part of our procedures that we do it. They made revisions to their policy. You guys saw that. And so they're saying that we're going to still do it, but we're not going to come to you every time. We're just going to do it. And here's why we're going to do it this way.
How do they enforce that? Do they sit with the person?
If they want to make a phone call, yeah, then they're,
Somebody sits there with.
I don't think they're sitting there during it there, but they will dial, or they're nearby, not interfering with the privacy, because it won't impact their privacy of phone calls, because we
Yeah, that's not a part of the variance. No, they still should have a right to privacy. It's just, you're only allowed to call these people.
and these people only allowed to call you.
Calls the person and then they leave.
Either that way, or the numbers provided to the staff will sit and dial, leave the room. Sometimes though, they'll be on the outside of the room. They've kind of described some environments where that occurs, but individual still has privacy in the phone call.
No, you can request your treatment team. Listen, my friend Sue was, she's not listed on there. She's my best friend. I really want to talk to her. You can go to the treatment team and ask for them to add people. So at any time you can say,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's in the farther into it, where it talks about the list can be modified at any time. People can be added and taken away.
but because of their trauma history, there may be people on there that they want to have on there that you clinically don't feel is appropriate. And so that's why the decision is being taken away from the individual completely designing and developing this. So though they are able to participate in the development of the list, there may be people that the individual wants, that the team, not one individual, that the team decides is not appropriate. And so it's a clinical decision to add or remove those particular individuals.
How does the client know that they have the right to ask about a specific?
I believe that that's reviewed with them at admission when they're developing the list, and and we can find that out to make.
That's important to me to hear that there's a clear conversation with the client, okay? If my cousin calls someone that I would like to remove it, like, I want some sort of course of action to get him on the list.
Mhm.
Or some appeals process where they say, fan can't come to you. But you can be. Sure, that's a good question.
Say that again.
How often is the contact list reviewed?
With that client and the team.
Or is it only upon request of?
Well, I think it's initially, and then anytime it's requested. I don't know that it's a routine, because some things are going to be standard, right? Your dealer is not ever getting on that list, right? Your parents are always going to be on that list. So unless somebody requests to add or delete somebody, I think that would have to be requested. I don't know. We can ask that. They can be a recommendation that it's reviewed with them.
Because the variance is required to be reviewed by you guys, I think annually, right?
Say that again?
Isn't the variance required to be reviewed by the LHRC annually? So that happens on a regular basis, but I'm not quite sure in terms of internally when the provider would be reviewing the contact list. That's a pretty good question.
What
And
happened-
also making sure that the individual is being notified, Denal, is that what you're saying? That the individual's being notified about how they can add or take away people? Is that what you're wanting to? Okay.
And then my other thought is the actual implementation of it. You know, take them to the room, we call the number, then we leave. Is it what kind of phone is it? Can they then call someone else while you're?
I
dosing
don't know that, and
medication?
that's a fair question, and that's right.
And then you have a happy-go-lucky staff who's following all the rules, and they see you calling somebody else that's not on that list. They put you on the train. What's the instruction to that staff to say this is what you not? No, that was a joke. But what steps do you take when someone is not going by that list? Because that's gonna happen.
Right. Somebody's gonna try to sneak in a phone call.
And that's up to them to address, right? That's a clinical issue that they can address with that individual.
Become a human rights issue if the staff is physically blocking
Right.
them or grabbing their hand from making them call.
So just to be clear, this process is currently in existence. And so whether that's happening now, we would know that now, like if there's complaints, like we can ask that. That's aside from the fact that they're going to do this list and not have you come to you every single time. So they're currently doing everything that we're talking about. The difference is that they're coming to you guys for every single approval. The variance is just saying, we're still going to do what we're doing. We're just not going to come to you. We want you to know that we're doing this restriction without that constant approval.
Here's my issue. Now you have approval that there's no longer this rule. Regulation.
To
Now-
cut,
Now there is a regulation that we're supposed to come every couple of weeks or every time we need
Yeah.
to do it. But there's a thing that happens when it says, now we don't even have that rule anymore. We can restrict you from
no,
phone calls.
all they're doing is, the process that they're doing now is development of the contact list. They're already doing that. They're already meeting with them at admission and developing this. All this is happening now, right? The only change is that coming to you monthly and saying, here's our next 5, here's our next 5, we'll be back in 3 months, here's our next 5. So they're still doing that process that they've been doing. They're just eliminating the LHRC review part of it.
Who are they doing it with?
What do you
They've
mean?
never done it with us.
Yeah, you guys have been reviewing these.
We did like 6 of them at a time, I think, at one of our other ones, virtual.
People come to meetings, you know.
Oh.
That was a joke. So no, we
It was
have.
probably the one that you missed that we.
Yeah, we
reviewed.
did. We had, so when we
Okay,
knew,
I just want to make sure that.
no, we have been reviewing them. So no, and so I will say that because this isn't a free pass, so our job is to still monitor it. Our job is to still make sure that even though they're not coming to you for the review, that they are still following all the rules and the development of the rules, that they're not violating the rights, that they're not blocking them from making another phone call, that's implemented uniformly. So that review and our jobs, that still exists. This variance is just that we're going to do this restriction and we're not going to have approval for every single time. We're going to do it for everybody. And that's going to be our modus operandi. We're going to do this. And we want you to know that we're doing this restriction. We don't want to have to come every single time with 5 and 6 different names every month. That's the purpose of it. Saves you work, saves them work, because they're going to do it. There's good reason to do it. There's clinical evidence why they're developing these lists. It's based on clinical information because of the trauma history, making sure that people who are there for treatment of these issues are not still having contact with people who have caused the trauma. So there's clinical rationale for developing the list. The implementation of how they do any of those is always monitored by us. And individuals can always call up and say, hey, I was on the phone the other day and they grabbed that phone out of my hands. I mean, they like tackled me to the ground. Those things still apply. Those rights never go away. The only variance, because so variance, kind of like when governor did the, not,
State of emergency.
thank you, I cannot come up with the word, state of emergency. In all of our regulations, only 2 lines were suspended, 2 lines, that was it, not anything else, and people had a hard time with it. And it was, where visitation, that one was gone away, it's as if it never existed. And the one about isolation and quarantine, that was changed because if you were actually doing isolation, if you were quarantining, that went away. Everything else stayed in place. So in terms of a variance, you're saying this 1, 2 lines, these 2 sections are the only 2 where we're gonna do something different, but everything else is still in play. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, yeah.
To what next?
Other programs.
Other programs do it in the state. In Region 5, there's several providers that have variances in place. Yeah.
For contact list because of
Yeah.
the volume and the workload associated with it. So this provider had, 46 people in their programs that had these 4. So we spaced them out. I feel like we did like 13 or 20. No, we did like 20.
First time we didn't. I don't think we did 20.
No. We go through them. We're good. Yeah.
Cheryl, you don't remember reviewing it?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. Yeah, because we
Well,
had
maybe you're right, because I remember thinking that's a huge number, but then like we did get through them
because
pretty quickly.
the form was the same. For
I think you're
everybody.
right. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The one she missed. It was a big one.
Off camera. So it's just to make it more fluid of a process. They're not coming here with 20, because other providers are bigger than this provider. And if they didn't have the variance, they'd be dumping 20 on every LHRC meeting. So we still monitor the implementation. It is fair feedback to say, ensure that the individual is notified of the ability to add, subtract, and revise the list. So what we can ask is the individual signing the contact list? We can ask clarification. And if they're not, we would ask that they do sign it.
Well, there is a blurb in here in the initial letter from their CEO. The
Sorry.
provider would have the capabilities to add or remove names at any time with consent from the parent legal guardian. So that doesn't specifically say
But they have
at
the,
the request of the individual.
so the individual can ask anytime. That doesn't mean that people get added on, but they can ask at any time. So they should be, so there should be, I agree to these people, sign my name, and on that form it should say, I can ask at any time to have someone add or subtract it. So I think that that's fair feedback to ensure that that's on, that they should sign something and know that they have the ability to request revisions. And so as a part of this process, you can approve with these recommendations. So, and as you see on here, we talked about that. So we can ask it, and these were suggestions, and that's not what I wrote on here. Doesn't have to be. The suggestion can be to ensure that the provider informs the individual of their ability to ask for revisions to that list at any time, make them aware of that process, and have them sign the contact list so that they're there. So that can be in the recommendations that we send to the state director. And it may be that they have to go back and revise their policy that's not clear in there. So it may be that they have to do that. So you can approve with that recommendation. Any more questions or suggestions? Do you have other suggestions or recommendations? So if there's no other questions or suggested recommendations, we will develop a letter that indicates what this variance is, summarizes the variance. The chair will sign it, so I'll send it to you to review so that we can send this variance package up to the state human rights director.
And prior to, just as an FYI, prior to this packet, it had to go between us and them probably a good 5 times.
Yeah, yeah.
So it took a good like 3 or 4 months to get it here.
So there was a process. So there's 2 things and we can put them together. So a motion to approve the variance or not, someone can make a motion to not approve the variance. That's up to you guys. So motion to approve or not approve the variance with the recommendation that they ensure that the individual is notified of the ability to add, subtract, or revise the list at any time, and that there's a signed consent of the contact list and the ability to make changes. Very good. Can I have a second? Thank you. 180, you in agreement with this variance? Sue, are you in agreement with the variance? Cheryl, are you in agreement? Donaldo, you in agreement? Very good. All right, thank you. Where's my agenda? Anybody try to log on? Nope, okay. All right, I was a little long. That wasn't my fault, Donaldo.
I had to give you a little something.
Hey, that's, I know,
I've
we
been
missed it.
missing apparently.
I know.
Like this meeting's too quiet. What's missing?
So the next meeting is the 27th. Again, we anticipate that being in person at NVMHI. Remember that you do have to have a parking pass. I don't think they were mailed, right? You have to go in and get
You have to
yours?
go in and get it, yeah.
Yeah, so leave time to go in and get it and then come back out to hang it on your car. I'll talk to Carrie about directions for that. And that will be a longer meeting and will be in person. There will be closed session. But Madam Chair, you can adjourn if there's no other business conducted or anything else you want to say. You just call it. What time? Oh. Awesome. Very good. Thank you. I'm going to stop recording.